Hey guys, welcome back to Advanced Bass Fishing, and appreciate you guys coming by the channel for the episode today. We're going to be talking about one of the greatest bass catchers in history of bass fishing, which is the Zoom trickworm today. I want to give you guys some tips and advice on how I like to fish it and the conditions it works good in. And also I'm going to show you guys how I like to rig it. There's several different rigging options for the trickworm we're going to go over today. Definitely, in fact, I know it's going to add up to a lot more good fish for you guys, so we'll get into that. And also guys, I will put the Zoom trickworm in my tackle warehouse link in the description of this video. I'll link the trickworm in there. If you guys use that link, it's a great way to support the channel here, much appreciated. And also guys, real quick, anybody interested in booking a personal one-on-one on the water lesson with me, all you have to do is go to my Facebook page, Intuitive Angling with Randy Blaukat, shoot me a private message for details and we'll get that squared away, so really appreciate that. Okay, you can't go wrong with the trickworm, guys. The trickworm is arguably one of the greatest bass catchers in the history of bass fishing. I would probably put it up there with the Senko in terms of the number of bass that have been caught on one single lure over the past 20 years. I bet a Senko and a trickworm, probably the top two lures as far as the number of fish that have ever been caught. And it's just a simple, old school worm, guys. You guys have probably heard of like the cream worm. The cream worm was like one of the first plastic worms that came out in the late 60s and early 70s. And it basically looked just like a trickworm. It was a straight-tailed worm just like this, about the same diameter. The only difference with the cream worm is it didn't have the color options. You had purple, black, and blue, and that was about it. And now you've got so many different color options with the trickworm. You've got, you know, all different type of glitter options. You got watermelon with 5 or 6 types of glitter in it. You've got green pumpkin with different glitter. Every lure they make comes in different glitter. So the diversity of conditions that a trickworm works in is just all over the board. I mean, it literally works in any water condition that you have. Okay, before we get into like the meat and potatoes of it, I want to really get into like when I like to fish it and the specific conditions. I want to show you guys the rigging options that I use with it before we get started. Now, the first thing is a trickworm is an excellent bait to fish as a wacky rig. A lot of people use like a Senko or something like that. The difference between like a Senko or soft plastic stick bait and the trickworm is the trickworm is more subtle and it falls a lot slower. So if you put like a 5-inch Senko on there and put it next to the trickworm will fall about twice as slow as the Senko. Now this is really, really effective in shallower water. So if you're fishing water that is like, you know, less than 4 foot deep, especially around some type of aquatic vegetation or very shallow cover, the trickworm will get you more bites because it's more subtle and slow falling. Skipping it underneath docks, really good way to fish it. It's such a bass catcher. There was a angler, his name was Carl Sweevack. A lot of you guys probably have never heard of him, but if you have, Carl, back in the early 2000s pretty much, he made a living on the trickworm on a wacky rig. He'd kick everybody's butt on this thing, just fishing it, you know, wherever everybody else was fishing. Okay, the next way, and this is probably my favorite way to fish a trickworm, is on a shaky head. And I got the Gamakatsu tricky head on there. Guys, I'll put this link also in my tackle warehouse link. This tricky head is the best shaky head out there. But just shaky head rigging a trickworm. Guys, this is my favorite shaky head bait is the Zoom trickworm on a shaky head like that. And I usually rig it, I leave the point out like that unless it's really snaggy. And if it's snaggy, I'll just, you know, put it back in there just a little bit like that. But guys, in fact, I don't know. It's like, as far as the numbers of bass that I have caught over the past 20 years, I probably caught more bass on this bait right here than any other lure that I fished. A shaky head trickworm out there. It'll get you tons of bites. And then finally, as far as the rigging option, the other way I rig it is Texas rigging it. Now, a trickworm is an excellent Texas rig worm bait. It's very subtle, it's very simple. It is an outstanding lure to fish around any type of shallow cover pitching and flipping. A lot of people, when they think about pitching and flipping, they're thinking about, you know, jigs or creature baits or bigger worms or stuff like that. But guys, I can tell you right now that you put a trickworm on a Texas rig like that, and this is one of the best flipping baits that you're ever going to have. It's It's subtle. It doesn't telegraph itself. It's very nuanced in the water. It looks natural. It looks like a worm in there, and it is just an outstanding bait to fish as a Texas rig. So let's talk about the three scenarios here. We've talked about how I rig them. Now let's talk about the specific scenarios where I fish each rig at, as far as those three. Okay, now shaky head is going to be primarily my spring bait. Not to say you can't catch them at different times of year, but for me, it's like a shaky head has a water temperature window in springtime of the year between about 55 and 75 degrees is when I fish it. So I'll start, like in my part of the country here in Missouri, it may be different where you're at geographically, but here in the Ozarks where I fish, like Lake of the Ozarks, Table Rock, I'll usually start fishing a shaky head, probably about mid-March when that water temperature is in the 50s. And then I'll fish it up until, May or so when the water temperature is in 75 degrees or so. The two primary areas I fish with the shaky head are secondary points. Now, the secondary points are key because in the pre-spawn, the secondary points are really good staging areas for those fish to get ready to go back in the nearby coves to spawn. And then in the post-spawn, those same secondary points are sort of like holding areas that bass move to after they get done spawning before they disperse out through the lake. So you can't go wrong just casting that trick worm on a shaky head on secondary points. I usually get back like in some major creek arms, and I try to find some coves that are nearby these points, and I'll fish those points anywhere between, say, 5 to 25 foot deep, depending upon your water clarity. Those fish will get deeper on that shaky head than what you think in the spring time of the year if you have clear water, especially if you have spotted bass in it. Really good way to catch them. Now, if that water temperature is in the 60s specifically, and in and around the time the fish are spawning, this is when I'll go two different things. I'll use the wacky rig and I'll use the shaky head both. And I'm looking for these spawning type areas. And I'm not targeting spawning fish per se, but I'm targeting the type of areas that they're either spawning in or they're moving into or they're moving out of. So these are going to be hard bottom, flatter, protected areas. Coves, bays, whatever your lake has in it, where the fish like to spawn at or look for areas to spawn at. And I'll take that trick worm and I'll put it on 1/16 of an ounce shaky head, a light head, and I'll cover water with it. I usually like the shaky head if the water's a little bit, say if the water is pretty clear, like if you've got water visibility over 5 or 6 feet, a lot of times I'll use the shaky head because I can get it down a little deeper quicker. But if the water visibility is like less than 4 foot, that's when I'll go to the wacky rig trick worm, and I'll fish shallower with it. So I'm fishing really slow, I'm fishing really methodical, and I'm trying to cover sort of that 2 to 10 foot depth with both the shaky head trick worm and the wacky rig trick worm, depending upon the wind speed, depending upon the water depth and the water clarity. You can't go wrong with that. I mean, it is a deadly way to catch them. And if you got docks, guys, if you got any boat docks, it doesn't matter if they're floating docks or if they're piling type docks, skipping that wacky rig trick worm with the water temperatures in the 60s under like the walkways of those docks, or back in the pilings, if you got piling docks, you can catch so many good fish doing that. It's a deadly way to catch bass with it. Occasionally I have caught them also Texas rigging with no weight, doing the same thing if the cover's a little bit heavier. But that's my primary approach when that water temperature is in the 60s and 70s. Now the Texas rig trick worm is my warm water flipping bait. So this is going to be a technique that I use if the water temperatures are over 75 degrees and if I've got just some type of shallow cover. It works in a lot of different water clarity ranges. Again, just depending on how clear your water is and the type of cover you have. But ideally, I like to flip that trick worm in and around areas that have water visibility between about, say, 1 to 3 foot. If the water visibility is like dirtier, like around 1 foot of visibility, I'm using the darker colors like a solid black, a June bug, a red bug. If the water visibility is closer to 2.5 or 3 feet, I'm using some type of watermelon or green pumpkin, usually pitching and flipping it. My favorite is a 3/16 sinker with like a 2-watt Gamakatsu G Finesse worm hook on it. And I'll usually flip and pitch it like on 17 to 20 pound test Sea Garden Vizex fluorocarbon. it's a great bait for pitching and flipping. Flooded bushes also work good. Stumps, laydowns, trees, lily pads, shallow grass, cypress trees, whatever cover that you may have. It'll get you bites when nothing else will as far as the lure goes. So that's primarily how I fish it. Some of my favorite colors in it, if you could give me like 2 colors to use and that would cover about every condition: watermelon candy for the cleaner water, like if the water visibility is over, say, 2.5, 3 feet, I catch a ton of fish on watermelon candy. And if the water visibility is under about 2 foot, I catch a lot of fish on that red bug. So red bug for a little bit off-colored water, watermelon candy for clear. But in the dirtier water, I use red bug, I use June bug, and black sapphire. So those are the 4 that I use in dirty water of less than 2 foot visibility. And then the different ones I'll try if the water's clear, again, are watermelon candy, green pumpkin, you can't go wrong with it. Green pumpkin purple is one of my favorites. If the water is really, really clear, like over 5 foot of clarity, I go to like a watermelon red, and those will pretty much encompass it with that. So deadly, guys, I'm telling you, if you haven't tried it, if you could give me, here's in my fishing, it's like if they could say, Randy, you have got to feed your family, right? You've got to put, for the next 10 years, you have got to feed your family, and you can have one lure to do it. I would say give me a bunch of trick worms, different colors. Let me rig them up the 3 ways that I'm talking about, and I can promise you guys, I could feed my family in any lake in this country on those baits throughout the course of the year doing it. So anyway, I hope it helps you guys out. We'll talk later.